Delighted to be joined now by independent economist Julian Jessup as well. A very good morning to you, Julian.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Well, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating today looking at the front pages and across the board from left to right, whether it's the Mirror or the Guardian or the Mail, Telegraph, Times and the Sun and others, really not very happy with Rachel Reeves. From her backbenchers to many of her cabinet colleagues, I suspect, she has not done the job with her spring statement. What is your big takeaway from what she had to say?
Well, I think it could have been worse, actually. I think she...
There you go. That's the best you can say. It could have been worse.
The best I could do, yeah. I mean, she didn't, for example, relax her fiscal rules, as some people have been arguing for, in order to borrow more for defence or welfare, which would have pushed up borrowing costs. She also resisted pressure to raise taxes again, and in particular to impose a wealth tax that would have backfired by depressing investment and driving more taxpayers overseas. So it could have been worse. She did make some reasonably important savings on the welfare bill and efficiency savings elsewhere in the public sector. So as I say, it could have been worse. But the reality is still that things have deteriorated since the Labour government took power. So we had that budget back in October that included a massive increase in the tax bill, including on working families through raising employers' national insurance. And also, while she is lightening regulations in some areas, things like planning reforms and financial services, she's tightening regulations in others, particularly in the labour market with the so-called Employment Rights Bill and everything that's happening on net zero. So it's far from clear to me that she is fixing the foundations of the economy. If anything, she's undermining the foundations of the private sector, which ultimately is the key driver of growth and job creation.
And this is the thing, the people who are criticising her, certainly from her own party, are largely criticising her, say, from the wrong line. They don't think there should be any welfare cuts. They think there should be more worker rights. There should be higher taxes. I mean, just the constant cry on the benches yesterday of like, oh, tax the wealthy, tax the wealthy. We already do that. And proof is in the pudding. Every country that has tried to tax the wealthy more, especially this sort of idea, this sort of 1% one-off wealth tax once a year, or even just one-off. We know what happens when people try that. The wealthy leave and they don't pay any tax here at all.
That's absolutely right. We've got a lot of what I might call left-wing celebrities and social media stars at the moment banging on about the need to tax the rich and impose a wealth tax. But as you say, we do tax the rich. And when you actually ask them for details of what this wealth tax would actually be, they clearly don't have an idea. I mean, they don't have any idea about economics or even how the tax system works at the moment. So, I'm happily going to debate with anybody who thinks a wealth tax is a good idea.
I always love the very rich celebrities who call for it and said they'd happily pay more. And I'm like, well, free to. I mean, it's easy. You can go onto the HMRC website and you can offer to pay more anytime. Thank you very much for your lovely offer. Funnily enough, not many of them actually do. But in terms of the welfare cuts, the reality of a lot of this is it doesn't kick in for a few years. She's talking about freezing some of the benefits that people get who are in need, who are on these benefits, and cutting it basically, therefore, a cut below inflation. And at the same time, talking about limiting the number of people who can go on to benefits. But the reality is they've got no way of knowing whether they will be able to actually limit, by changing it to you have to have 4 points on this particular score or changing it from having a number of points totaling from various different things like can you get dressed on your own, can you walk a certain distance and the like. People have been able to fiddle this anyway, whether deliberately or just convincing themselves that they can't do these things. We have 1 million more people claiming these sorts of benefits than we did before the pandemic, way more, catastrophically more than any other Western nation. We've got people who are claiming to have autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, you name it, unable due to a mental health issue to be able to work. There's nothing in her reforms that is going to guarantee we're going to get those people off benefits, is there?
Well, I mean, starting with the big picture, a lot of people from the left in particular are accusing her of reintroducing austerity. I mean, that's clearly nonsense. Government spending is still going to increase massively over the next few years, including on welfare. The overall welfare bill is still going to rise just by slightly less than it would otherwise have done. In terms of the detail of the welfare cuts, I think I'm in favour of most of them. I don't think withdrawing benefits from people who don't really need them counts as austerity. And indeed, I don't think paying people benefits that they don't need is actually good for them either. No. I think it it'd be much better to support them into work, and to provide support in other ways for those.
But there's
really
no
need
evidence that we are going to support these people into work. And I was speaking to someone who works at a benefits office yesterday, off air, pointing out that people don't lose their personal independence payments until they are reassessed, even if they've been doing some work and they could be assessed that actually you don't need this anymore. You don't lose it until you are reassessed. And she says they are 2 years behind on reassessment appointments.
Well, I do have some concerns about the detail here. I mean, it's interesting. The Chancellor is obsessed with this figure of 9.9 billion for the
fiscal headroom.
9.9 billion, not 10 billion or 9.8 billion.
It's 9.93 billion.
Oh, even more accurate. And that's based on a 5-year forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility. I think even the Office for Budget Responsibility would admit would almost certainly be wrong.
Yeah.
And what's happened in the last few days is she's had to scramble around to find a few extra 100 million of savings from the welfare budget in order to meet that entirely artificial target. And I know I'm not an expert on the benefit system, but I think it's very unlikely that if you're scrambling around at the last minute to find savings, you've done so in the most efficient and fairest way. So I wouldn't be surprised if some genuinely vulnerable people will slip through the net as a result of this. And that's down to her. And
that's going to be the real worry, isn't it? She did say, though, look, things are difficult. They're going to get better. We know that the forecasts, the terrible, downgrading of the growth forecast for this year from 2% to 1%, halving. But growth rising up through the rest of the term in office, although not reaching the 2.5% that is needed for all the government plans that they announced before the election. She says, though, look, they're fixing the foundations. They plan to build more houses, free up planning and things like that. Is that going to be enough?
No, to be fair, she is doing some positive things. I do think the new fiscal rules are sensible. I genuinely approve of the increase in public investment. I think the planning reforms are good, and deregulation of other sectors as well. So there are some things she's doing on what economists call the supply side of the economy. But I also think that's more than offset by other things she's doing. So the increase in taxes, she's, even if you think taxes should have gone up, she's raised the wrong taxes. Yeah. The taxes on jobs, stamp duty and so on. And also she's increasing regulation in other areas, including the labour market and all the net zero stuff on top of that. So it's sort of 2 steps forward, but I'd argue at least 3 steps back. And in the meantime, growth is suffering. There was that big downgrade in growth, partly due to global headwinds, but mainly due to measures the new government itself has taken. Yeah, and so when she says, and we heard this was what we were discussing on the show yesterday, that things happen in the global markets, we're not in control of that. Ukraine, they didn't say Donald Trump, but wink, wink, it's Donald Trump. But the reality is none of that's going away. And £9.93 billion of fiscal headroom, or £10 billion of fiscal headroom, is neither here nor there for dealing with the sort of unforeseen circumstances, like the unforeseen circumstances of things like, a COVID pandemic, lockdown, furlough, Ukraine being invaded. What about Taiwan being invaded? There are lots of unforeseen things that could happen, and we've got a spare £9.93 billion to deal with it all. Yeah, as people say, stuff happens, and I think any stuff.
I think it's a different word they use, but thank you for your choice of words, sir.
Yeah, but I think the stuff that's likely to happen between now and the autumn budget is more likely to be bad stuff than good stuff. So I think there's a very high chance that she'll have to come back again in the autumn and raise taxes further. And the government has already floated various ideas for how they might do this. For example, extending the freeze on personal tax allowances, which is the stealth tax that drags more people into paying higher rates. I think there are lots of other things you might do on things like fuel duty and other measures as well that will raise the tax burden. I think that is why we might sigh a small sigh of relief yesterday that taxes haven't gone up. But I think it's almost inevitable they will at some point soon.
Yeah, listen, another one of those happy Thursdays. Julia Jessup, independent economist, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Philip Ingram, I think it's really important that we do give credit where it's due for the good things. And I don't like, whether it's, in American politics or British politics, this sort of everything this person does is wrong. They're a bad person. I take, I've written articles saying like praising Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves on the plan for house building and dealing with the planning issue, and they're going to say they're going to build nuclear reactors. Well, get on with it. I'm all in favour of that. But when she says she's fixing the foundations, I think a lot of people would genuinely pay attention if it was explained to them properly. We're going to have to raise taxes. We're going to have to build a lot of stuff so that we can. It's going to cost more to train people up to get them so that they can be the brickies of the future, the scaffolders of the future, who are going to help build these homes. We're going to get them off benefits. We're going to do all that. There is a cost to that. I mean, the universal credit changes cost more. They didn't save money. Ian Duxbury was very clear. They're not going to save money in the early years. It's a long-term thing. Training people up, the carrot costs more than the stick of just removing those benefits. But they're not really doing that properly anyway. And if as we were saying earlier, if you're going to import a whole load of new people to the country, those jobs are not going to be going to the people who are currently on the dole or on benefits of any sort. Those houses you're building are not going to go to them either. And so you're kind of back to square one again.
Well, and there's lots of areas where she could look at novel tax regimes to increase the revenue that's coming in. That's not going to hit the average person in the street and all the rest of it. A quick example is gambling. 2021-22, gambling made a total gambling revenue guide of £14.1 billion. Pounds. A percentage of tax on that, and that's just one area. There's lots of areas around the place that you can hit.
I mean, to be fair, if we didn't have betting shops and things on the high street and charity shops, there'd be nothing left in the high street, indeed. I mean, exactly. There are other things we need to tax, but again, I'm not sure that, as a general rule, that basing everything on just more and more and more tax. If more and more and more tax delivered a better economy, we would be flying by now, and we are not.
Yeah, I'll give her another big tick. Yeah. Again, what she said in defence and spending more money, she is then creating a new body to try and make defence expenditure more efficient, and that is one area that has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of it needs to be more efficient, but there we are. I'd like a bit more Doge territory on that.